I'm sorry, honey, but it was just sitting there, rotting. It's for your own good, really." My mother's voice was like honey poured over broken glass, sweet, thick, and incredibly sharp. I was sitting in a hospital bed, the sterile scent of antiseptic clinging to my skin like a second layer of clothing. My lungs still felt heavy, a reminder of the pneumonia that had nearly taken me under 2 weeks ago. I looked at her, my vision slightly blurred by the medication. "What do you mean, Mom? What was sitting there?" She didn't look at me. She was too busy smoothing out the wrinkles in her designer trench coat, the one I had bought her for her birthday last year. The car, that vintage Mustang. You know you couldn't afford the insurance anyway, not with these medical bills coming. I found a buyer, a lovely man. He took it off the lot this morning. The world tilted. That 1967 Mustang wasn't just a car. It was the only thing my father had left me. It was my sanctuary, my project, and my ticket out of this small, stifling town. "You sold my car?" I whispered. My voice felt like it was being squeezed through a straw. "Without my permission? Without even calling me?" She finally looked up, and for a second I saw it. Not guilt, not sadness. It was a flicker of cold, calculated triumph. "I have power of attorney, remember? You signed those papers when you were admitted. You were so out of it you didn't even know your own name. I did what a mother does. I protected you from your own poor financial choices." I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. The power of attorney. I remembered the nurse bringing in a stack of forms while I was gasping for air, the room spinning, my mother whispering, "Just sign here, baby, so I can talk to the doctors for you." She hadn't just taken the car. She had waited for me to be at my weakest to strip away the one thing that made me feel like myself. "How much?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "How much did you sell it for?" She waved a hand dismissively. "Enough to cover your first few days here. Don't be ungrateful. Most girls would kill to have a mother who handles the dirty work while they're sick." She leaned in then, her perfume, overpowering and expensive, choking out the smell of the hospital. "And besides," she whispered, "you were never really meant for big things, were you? You're a follower. You need someone to lead you. This is just a fresh start." She patted my hand, her rings cold against my skin, and walked out of the room, her heels clicking a rhythmic mocking beat against the linoleum. I sat there in the silence, the steady beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor sounding like a countdown. She thought I was broken. She thought she had finally clipped my wings so I'd stay in her shadow forever. But as I stared at the empty space where my keys used to sit on the nightstand, I felt something shifting deep inside me. It wasn't just anger. It was a cold, hard clarity. You see, there was something my mother didn't know, something she had overlooked in her greed to sell that car. Hidden in the secret compartment of that Mustang, the one my father showed only to me, was a small leather-bound ledger, and inside that ledger wasn't just the history of the car. It was the history of our family's business dealings that involved her, the town council, and a very large sum of money that had disappeared 10 years ago. She thought she sold a car, but she actually just handed my father's evidence over to a stranger. Or so she thought. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling not from weakness, but from the sudden rush of adrenaline. I had work to do, and the surprise I was going to give my mother, well, she'd never see it coming. But before I tell you what I found on that phone and the secret I'd been keeping even from myself, I need to know. Have you ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you? Have you ever had a family member take something that didn't belong to them? Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from tonight. And it helps me feel less alone in this hospital room. And if you want to see how I take everything back, and I mean everything, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. This is just the beginning of the end for her. The door to my hospital room clicked shut, leaving me in a silence so thick I could almost taste it. My mother's perfume lingered, a floral scent that now felt like a funeral shroud. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the little dots, trying to force my heart rate to slow down. The monitor was still betraying me, its frantic chirp, 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 echoing the panic rising in my chest. She thought she had won. She honestly believed that by selling that Mustang, she'd severed my last tie to my father and my last shred of independence. In her mind, I was back to being the little girl who looked to her for every meal, every choice, and every breath. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I reached for my phone on the tray table. My hands were shaking, but not from the fever this time. I unlocked it and scrolled past the get well texts from people who didn't actually care, stopping when I reached an app that wasn't labeled. It looked like a simple calculator icon. I punched in a 6-digit code. The screen flickered and transformed. A map appeared, glowing with a soft blue light. A single pulsing red dot sat perfectly still, about 3 miles from the hospital. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My mother was many things, calculating, cold, and incredibly vain. But she wasn't a car person. She saw the Mustang as a shiny toy, a relic of a husband she had never truly loved. She didn't know that my father and I had spent 3 years rebuilding that engine from the ground up. She didn't know that during those long nights in the garage, he taught me more than just how to change an oil filter. "Always have a backup, kiddo," he'd say, his hands covered in grease. People see a car and they think it's just transport. They don't look at what's hidden in the bones. When I was 21, Dad helped me install a high-end military-grade GPS tracker tucked deep inside the frame, powered by a backup battery that could run for months. He told me it was for safety in case I ever got stranded on a road trip. But the way he looked at me, his eyes darting toward the house where my mother sat sipping her wine, told me it was for a different kind of safety. He was protecting me from her, even then. I tapped the red dot. The address popped up. Miller's Auto Salvage and Wholesale. My blood ran cold. She hadn't sold it to a lovely man for a fresh start. She had sold it to a scrapyard, a place where cars went to die, or worse, to be stripped and sold for parts before the sun went down. She didn't just want the money, she wanted the car destroyed. She wanted the memory of my father erased. I felt a surge of cold, white-hot fury. It started in my toes and roared up through my chest, burning away the last of the medicinal fog. I pressed the call button for the nurse. A few minutes later, a young woman named Sarah walked in. She'd been kind to me over the last week, sneaking me extra packets of applesauce when the hospital food was too depressing to eat. "Hey, everything okay? Your vitals spiked," she said, checking the monitor. "Sarah, I need to get out of here," I said, my voice steady for the first time in days. "Honey, you're still on IV antibiotics. You've got at least 2 more days of observation." "I'm leaving today," I insisted, sitting up. The world swayed for a moment, but I gripped the side of the bed until it steadied. "I'll sign the against medical advice forms. I'll do whatever I have to do, but I cannot stay in this bed while my life is being dismantled." Sarah looked at me, really looked at me. She saw the desperation, but she also saw the steel. "Is this about your mom?" I saw her leaving. She looked pleased with herself. "She sold my father's car to a junkyard while I was asleep," I said. "If I don't get there in the next hour, it'll be a cube of metal." Sarah bit her lip. She shouldn't have done it. It was against every protocol in the book. But she looked at the door, then back at me. "I'm going on my break in 10 minutes. My car is in the south lot. If you can get dressed and meet me there, I didn't see a thing, but you have to promise me you'll go straight to a doctor if you start feeling dizzy." "I promise," I said, already reaching for the wires attached to my chest. 10 minutes later, I was shuffling through the side exit of the hospital, wearing an oversized hoodie and leggings, my breath hitching in the cool afternoon air. Sarah was waiting in a beat-up sedan. She didn't say a word as I climbed in. She just followed the GPS coordinates I pointed to on my phone. As we pulled into Miller's Auto Salvage, my heart stopped. There it was. My 1967 Mustang. It was hooked up to a crane, the giant metal claw hovering just inches above the roof. Standing next to the crane was a man in greasy coveralls, and my mother. She wasn't just selling it. She was standing there to watch it be crushed. She had a camera out, ready to film the moment the roof buckled. "Stop," I screamed, throwing the car door open before Sarah had even fully braked. I stumbled out, my legs feeling like jelly, but I didn't stop. I ran, half limping, half sprinting, toward the crane operator. "Stop, that's my car, the sale is illegal." My mother turned around, her face twisting from triumph to absolute shock. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in bed. You're sick." "I'm sick of you," I yelled, reaching the man in the coveralls. "I am the legal owner of this vehicle. I have the title in my name. Whatever she showed you, it wasn't valid." The man looked from me to my mother, then back to the car. "She showed me a power of attorney and a signed bill of sale, lady. I already paid her." "The power of attorney was for medical decisions only." I lied through my teeth, praying he wouldn't ask for proof. "And she didn't tell you the car is part of an active investigation, did she?" That got his attention. He lowered the claw. My mother stepped forward, her eyes narrowing into slits. "Don't listen to her. She's delirious. The fever is back. Honey, get in the car. We're going back to the hospital." She reached for my arm, her grip like a vice, but I pulled away, leaning against the warm metal of my Mustang. "You want to play this game, Mom?" I whispered so only she could hear. "You want to talk about legal and illegal? Let's talk about the ledger, Mom. Let's talk about the blue book Dad kept in the hidden panel under the passenger seat." I watched the blood drain from her face. It was the most satisfying thing I had ever seen. The color vanished from her cheeks, leaving her looking old and haggard. He told you about that?" she stammered. "He showed me," I said, my voice gaining strength. "And if this car goes into that crusher, that book goes with it. And if that book is destroyed, I have no reason not to go to the police and tell them exactly what Dad told me before he died. About the money, about the town council, about you." She looked at the car, then at the man in the coveralls, then back at me. She was trapped. If she crushed the car, she destroyed the evidence, but she also lost her leverage over me. If she let me take the car, I had the evidence, but I had a third option, one she hadn't considered. "Give him back the money, Mom," I said, "now, or I open that panel right here in front of everyone." She looked like she wanted to scream. Instead, she reached into her expensive bag, pulled out a thick envelope of cash, and threw it at the man's feet. "Fine," she hissed, leaning close to my ear. "You have your car, but don't think this is over. You have nothing else. No house, no job, and now no mother. Good luck surviving on your own." She turned and marched away, her heels sinking into the dirt of the junkyard. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, tears finally stinging my eyes. I had the car. I had the ledger. But I was standing in a junkyard, shivering, with no place to go and a body that was still fighting an infection. But as I reached under the passenger seat and felt the familiar click of the hidden latch, my fingers brushed against something else. Something I hadn't expected. It wasn't just the ledger. There was a second envelope, a heavy one. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside was a key to a safety deposit box and a note in my father's handwriting. For when she finally shows her true colors, go to the bank in the next town over. Don't look back. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. My father knew this day would come. He had planned for it. And as I looked at the ledger, I realized the secrets inside were much, much bigger than a few crooked town officials. My mother hadn't just been stealing money. She had been hiding a second family, and I was about to find out exactly who they were. I sat in the driver's seat of the Mustang, the interior smelling like old leather and my father's peppermint gum. My heart was still hammering, a rhythmic drumming against my ribs that felt like a war march. Sarah, the nurse, was standing by her car a few yards away, looking anxious. She had risked her job to bring me here, and I couldn't stay any longer. "I'm okay, Sarah," I called out, my voice raspy. "I'm going to a friend's house, thank you. I owe you my life." She hesitated, then nodded and drove off. I watched her taillights disappear, leaving me alone in a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered glass. I looked down at the second envelope. The paper was yellowed at the edges, but the ink was crisp. Don't look back. Those 3 words felt like a heavy weight and a light breeze all at once. I tucked the ledger and the new envelope deep into my bag. My hands were shaking as I put the key in the ignition. For a terrifying second, I thought the battery might be dead, that my mother had found a way to kill the car's spirit too. But then, the engine roared to life. A deep guttural growl that vibrated through the floorboards and into my bones. "Let's go, Dad," I whispered. I didn't go back to the hospital. I didn't go back to the house I had shared with my mother, the house that was technically in her name, bought with the very money she'd stolen from my father's estate. I drove 40 miles north to the next town, a place called Silver Creek. I found a cheap motel on the outskirts, the kind with flickering neon signs, and a manager who didn't ask why a woman in a hospital hoodie was paying in cash. I locked the door, pushed a chair under the handle, and collapsed onto the bed. I didn't sleep. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face, that cold, triumphant mask she wore when she thought she had erased me. At dawn, I opened the ledger. I had looked at it before, years ago, but I hadn't understood the math. Now, with the clarity of a woman who had lost everything, the numbers started to speak. There were payments, regular monthly installments, sent to an account labeled LR Project. I had always assumed LR stood for some local real estate venture, but as I flipped to the back of the book, I found a series of photos tucked into a hidden flap. My breath hitched. The photos were of a house, not a grand mansion, but a beautiful sun-drenched cottage by a lake, and in every photo, there was a girl. She looked to be about 5 years younger than me. She had the same high cheekbones, the same slight arch in her eyebrows, but it was the woman standing next to her that made the room spin. It was my mother. She looked happy, truly happy. Not the brittle, performative joy she showed at country club brunches, but a soft, genuine glow. The dates on the back of the photos put them right in the middle of my childhood. While I was at home, trying to earn a good job or a proud of you from a woman who always seemed miles away, she was living another life. She was playing house with another daughter, Project Lily Rose. That was the name written on the back of one of the photos. I felt a wave of nausea. The betrayal I felt in the hospital was a paper cut compared to this. This was a soul-deep amputation. My mother hadn't just stolen my car or my money, she'd stolen the very idea of what my family was. She was using my father's money, the money he had worked himself into an early grave for, to fund a secret life for a secret daughter. I looked at the safety deposit box key. The tag on it said, Bank of Silver Creek, Box 402. I waited until the bank opened at 9 a.m. I used a thick layer of makeup to hide the dark circles under my eyes and wore a high-collared coat to hide the hospital ID bracelet I still hadn't cut off. The bank teller was an older man who moved with agonizing slowness. He led me into the vault, his keys jangling like a death knell. He left me alone with a heavy metal box. I turned the key. Inside wasn't just more money, it was a digital recorder and a stack of legal documents. I pressed play on the recorder. My father's voice filled the small, cold room. He sounded tired, his breath hitching the way mine did now. If you're hearing this, it means she's pushed you too far. It means I'm gone, and she thinks she's won. I found out about Lily 5 years ago. I didn't tell you because I wanted to protect you, but I realize now that was a mistake. I didn't just leave you the car, honey. I left you the leverage. In this box is the proof of her embezzlement from the town's pension fund. Money she used to buy that lake house. But more importantly, there's a document she doesn't know exists. I heard him cough on the recording, a sound that broke my heart. I never signed the house over to her. The deed to the lake house, it's in your name. It's always been in your name. I set it up as a trust for you. She's been living there, paying for it with stolen money, but on paper, you own her world. You have the power to take it all back. Use it wisely. The recording clicked off. I sat there in the silence of the vault, a cold, hard smile spreading across my face. My mother thought she had left me with nothing. She thought she had sold my only asset and left me to rot in a hospital bed. She didn't know that I was now the landlord of her secret life. I took the documents, the ledger, and the recorder. I walked out of that bank feeling taller than I had in years. I didn't feel sick anymore. I felt powerful. I had the keys to her kingdom, and it was time to pay her a visit. But I wasn't going to just show up and scream. No, she deserved something much more public. She was planning a massive charity gala this weekend to celebrate her appointment to the town council. The whole town would be there. The cameras would be rolling. It was the perfect place for a surprise. The mirror in my motel room didn't lie. I looked like a ghost. My skin was pale, my eyes were sunken, and my collarbone stood out too sharply. But there was a fire in my pupils that hadn't been there 48 hours ago. It was the kind of fire that doesn't just warm a room, it levels cities. I spent the next 2 days in that motel room, turning it into a war room. The bed was covered in bank statements, property deeds, and photos of the LR project. I realized that my mother hadn't just been stealing. She'd been a ghost in our own town, moving funds like a seasoned criminal. The charity gala she was hosting wasn't just a celebration of her power. It was likely a giant laundering operation to cover the tracks of the money she'd bled from the pension fund. She was so arrogant. She thought I was still draped over a hospital bed, weeping about a lost Mustang. I picked up the phone and made a few calls. First, to a local boutique I knew she frequented. "Yes," I said, my voice smooth and professional. "I'm calling on behalf of the committee for the gala. We're doing a surprise video tribute. We need a list of the VIP donors she's invited." Because I knew her passwords, her patterns, and her vanity, it was easy. By the time I hung up, I had the guest list. The mayor, the chief of police, the local press. Every person whose respect she craved was going to be in that ballroom tonight. Then I made the hardest call. I called the number listed on the property tax records for the lake house. "Hello?" A soft young voice answered. It was her. Lily. My heart twisted. This girl was innocent in this, but she was the living proof of my mother's betrayal. "Is this Lily?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Yes? Who is this?" "I'm a friend of your mother's," I lied, the words tasting like ash. "She wanted me to make sure you were coming to the gala tonight. There's a special seat reserved for you at the front. She wants to finally introduce you to everyone." There was a long silence on the other end. "Really? She always said it wasn't time. She said the people in town weren't ready." "Tonight is the night," I said. "Wear your best dress. A car will be sent for you." I hung up before she could ask anything else. I felt a pang of guilt. But it was quickly swallowed by the memory of my mother watching the crane hover over my father's car. She had built a wall of lies to keep her two worlds separate. I was just going to pull the lever and let them collide. I had one last stop to make before the party. I drove the Mustang to a small independent tech shop. I needed a way to ensure my tribute couldn't be turned off with a simple flick of a switch. "I need this file looped," I told the kid behind the counter, handing him a thumb drive. "And I need it to bypass a standard projector lockout. Can you do that?" He looked at the files, scanned images of the ledger, the deeds, and the photos. His eyes went wide. "Lady, you're not just making a video, you're dropping a bomb." "Just make sure it stays on," I said, sliding a $100 bill across the counter. I went back to the motel and got ready. I didn't wear black. That was for funerals. I wore a deep, blood-red silk dress I'd found in a vintage shop. It was bold, it was elegant, and it made me look like a woman who was very much alive. As I pulled up to the venue, the town's historic country club, the valet tried to take my keys. "No," I said, handing him a tip. "Leave it right here, in the front. I want everyone to see it when they walk out." I walked toward the double doors. The music was already playing, a soft, pretentious violin quartet. I could see my mother through the glass, draped in white lace, laughing with the mayor. She looked like a saint. She looked like a pillar of the community. She had no idea that her delirious daughter was standing 20 feet away, holding the matches to her entire life. I stepped inside, the heat of the ballroom hitting me. I didn't head for the bar or the food. I headed straight for the tech booth in the back, where a distracted college student was managing the slideshow of charity work my mother had supposedly done. "Hey," I whispered, leaning into the booth. "Change of plans. The committee has a new opening reel. My mother wants this played exactly at 8 p.m., right before her speech." He didn't even look up from his phone. "Sure thing. Just plug it in." I watched as the file uploaded. Surprise.mp4. I walked back into the crowd, blending into the shadows. I watched my mother. She was glowing, holding a glass of champagne, basking in the light of 100 cameras. She was at the peak of her mountain. Then the clock struck 8. The lights dimmed. The room went silent. My mother stepped onto the stage, the spotlight finding her like a heat-seeking missile. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice amplified and echoing. "Tonight is about legacy. It's about the things we leave behind for our children." On the massive screen behind her, the first image appeared. It wasn't a picture of a charity build. It was a high-resolution scan of the lake house deed. The room went deathly quiet. My mother didn't see it yet. She was still smiling. "I have spent my life trying to build a future for this town," she continued, her back to the screen. The next slide appeared, a photo of her at the lake house hugging Lily with the caption, "Funded by the City Pension Fund." A collective gasp rippled through the room. My mother froze. She saw the faces of the people in the front row. The mayor's jaw was literally hanging open. She turned around. The color didn't just leave her face this time. She looked like she had turned to stone. The next slide was the ledger, page after page of stolen amounts, clearly documented in her own handwriting. And then, the final blow. The side doors opened, and Lily walked in, looking confused and beautiful in a simple blue dress. "Mom?" Lily's voice wasn't amplified, but in the stunned silence, it carried through the entire hall. My mother looked at the screen, then at the secret daughter she'd hidden for nearly 2 decades. Then finally, she looked at me. I was standing in the center of the aisle, the red dress making me look like a wound in the middle of the room. I raised my glass of water, the only thing I could drink without shaking, and gave her a small, slow nod. "Surprise, Mom," I whispered. The silence in the ballroom was so heavy it felt physical. It was the kind of silence that happens right after a car crash, that split second where the world holds its breath before the screaming starts. My mother stood on that stage, bathed in a spotlight that now felt like an interrogation lamp. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. She looked between the massive screen showing her crimes and the young girl standing at the back of the room. "Mom?" Lily asked again, her voice trembling. She took a few steps forward, the heels of her simple shoes clicking on the hardwood. "What is this? Who are these people?" The mayor was the first to find his voice. He stood up, his face a deep shade of purple. "Is this a joke? Is this some kind of sick performance art?" He pointed a trembling finger at the screen, specifically at a line item in the ledger that showed a $50,000 diversion from the Public Works Fund. My mother finally snapped out of her trance. She didn't go to Lily, she didn't try to explain the money. Her first instinct, as always, was to attack. She scanned the crowd until her eyes locked onto mine. "You!" she hissed into the microphone. The feedback shrieked, making half the room wince. "You did this! You're sick! You're delusional from the fever!" She looked at the audience, her hands fluttering to her chest in a practiced gesture of maternal agony. "Please, everyone, ignore this. My daughter has been very ill. She's had a mental breakdown. She's obsessed with these fantasies because she can't handle her own failures." It was a good play. For a second, I saw doubt flicker in the eyes of the townspeople. They wanted to believe her. It was easier to believe I was crazy than to believe their Citizen of the Year was a common thief and a liar. But I was ready for the crazy card. I walked slowly toward the stage. Every eye in the room followed the red dress. I didn't look at the crowd. I kept my gaze fixed on the woman who had sold my father's legacy while I gasped for air in a hospital bed. "I have the originals, Mom," I said, my voice calm and clear, cutting through her hysterics. "I have the ledger my father kept. I have the bank records from Silver Creek. And most importantly," I paused, turning to the side, "I have the deed to the lake house, the one you've been living in, the one Dad left to me." The murmuring in the room turned into a roar. "That's a lie," she screamed, dropping the facade of the elegant lady. "I bought that house. I worked for everything I have." "With what money, Mom?" I asked, stepping onto the bottom stair of the stage. "The pension fund? Or the money you took from Dad's life insurance that was supposed to be my college fund? You told me it was lost in the market crash, but the ledger says you used it to buy a LR Project diamond tennis necklace. Are you wearing it tonight?" Her hand instinctively flew to her throat, covering the shimmering diamonds tucked under her lace collar. The crowd gasped. It was the smoking gun moment YouTube commenters love. Lily had reached the front of the room by now. She was looking at the screen, tears streaming down her face. She wasn't looking at the money, she was looking at the photos of herself. "You told me my father was a deadbeat who ran out on us," Lily whispered, looking up at my mother. "You told me we had to stay hidden because he was looking for us. But that man on the screen, that's her father. Are we sisters?" The word sisters hit the room like a physical blow. My mother looked at Lily, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not fear for her reputation, but fear of the truth. She had built a cage of lies for both of us, and the bars were melting. "Lily, honey, go to the car," my mother pleaded, her voice cracking. "I'll explain everything. This woman is dangerous. She's trying to hurt us." "The only person who hurt Lily was you," I said, finally reaching the top of the stage. I was taller than her now, even without the heels. "You kept her a secret like she was something to be ashamed of. You used her as a hiding place for your stolen life." I turned to the chief of police, who was standing near the buffet table, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Chief, I think you'll find the thumb drive currently playing contains enough evidence to warrant an immediate freeze on all of her accounts, including the charity account for tonight's event." My mother lunged for me then. It wasn't a calculated move. It was pure, animalistic rage. She reached for my hair, her nails clawing at my face. But I wasn't the weak girl in the hospital bed anymore. I stepped back, and she tripped over the long hem of her own expensive white dress, sprawling onto the floor of the stage. Her crown, the literal tiara she had bought herself for the evening, slid off and clattered across the wood, stopping at my feet. The cameras were all flashing now, not for the society pages, but for the evening news. I looked down at her. She looked small. She looked pathetic. The white lace was stained with spilled champagne from a nearby table she'd knocked over. "You're nothing," she spat, looking up at me from the floor. "Without me, you're a girl with a broken car and no home. I'll tie you up in court for decades. I'll make sure you never see a dime." "I don't want your money, Mom," I said, leaning down so only she could hear me over the chaos of the room. "I already have the car, and as for the house, I'm not going to sue you for it." She blinked, hope flickering in her eyes for a split second. "I'm giving it to Lily," I whispered, "and I'm giving the evidence to the district attorney. By the time you get out of prison, there won't be a single piece of my father's life left for you to touch." I stood up, leaving her on the floor. I walked over to Lily, who was shaking. I didn't know her. I didn't know if I ever would, but I took her hand. "Come on," I said. "Let's get out of here. I have a 1967 Mustang out front. It's a bit loud, but it'll get us where we need to go." As we walked out of the ballroom, the sound of the police sirens was already wailing in the distance. When we got to the car, there was a man standing there. A man I hadn't seen in 10 years. A man who looked exactly like the buyer, my mother said, had taken my car. And he was holding a very specific set of keys. The night air was crisp, a sharp contrast to the suffocating, perfume-choked heat of the ballroom. Behind us, the country club was a hive of panicked activity. Blue and red police lights began to rhythmically paint the white columns of the building in shades of disaster. Lily was huddled next to me, her thin shoulders shaking. She was looking at the Mustang as if it were a ghost ship, but my eyes were locked on the man standing next to my driver's side door. He was older, his hair a salt and pepper buzz cut, wearing a rugged canvas jacket that looked out of place among the luxury SUVs in the lot. In his hand, he was tossing a set of keys, my keys, the ones with the brass eagle keychain my father had given me on my 16th birthday. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice cracking. "My mother said she sold this car to a scrapyard." The man stepped into the light of the street lamp. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face. "She tried to. Offered it to me for pennies on the dollar, as long as I promised to have it in the crusher by midnight. Said it was a burden she needed removed from her life." He stopped tossing the keys and held them out to me. "But I knew your father. I served with him before you were even a thought. When I saw the name on the registration she was trying to forge over to me, I knew exactly what was happening." I reached out, my fingers brushing his as I took the keys. The metal was cold, but it felt like a jolt of electricity. "You're the lovely man she mentioned. You didn't scrap it." "Scrap a 67 fastback?" He let out a dry, gravelly laugh. "I'd sooner scrap my own soul. I took her money, told her the deed was done, and then I spent the last 3 hours detail cleaning your engine. I figured you'd be coming for it eventually, though. I didn't expect you to come out of that building with a sister and a police escort." He looked over at Lily, his expression softening. "You okay, kid?" Lily didn't answer. She was staring at the man, then at me. "She lied about everything," she whispered. "She told me I didn't have anyone. She told me the world was dangerous and that she was the only one who could keep me safe. But she was the danger, wasn't she?" I put my arm around her. "She was a parasite, Lily. She fed on secrets, but the lights are on now." The man in the canvas jacket nodded toward the club. "The chief is in there taking a statement from the mayor. Your mother is currently being escorted out the back service entrance to avoid the cameras, but I don't think it's working. The press caught her in the hallway." I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. My mother hated nothing more than being undignified. Being photographed in handcuffs with her makeup smeared and her tiara missing was a fate worse than death for her. "I'm Sam, by the way," the man said. "Your dad. He told me once that if things ever got sideways with her, I should keep an eye out for you. I didn't realize how sideways they'd gotten until I saw you in that hospital gown at the junkyard. You've got a lot of his grit in you." "Thank you, Sam," I said, my chest tightening, "for saving the car, for everything." "Don't thank me yet," Sam said, his voice dropping an octave. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small encrypted thumb drive. While I was cleaning the car, I found a secondary backup for the GPS tracker. It wasn't just recording location, it was recording audio inside the cabin. "Your mother had a few conversations in that car on the way to the junkyard. Conversations with someone who wasn't at that party tonight." I took the drive, the weight of it feeling heavier than the keys. "Who?" "The person who helped her move the money out of the pension fund," Sam said. "She didn't do this alone. You can't move 6 figures through a small town council without a signature from the auditor's office. This drive has the proof. She was planning to pin the whole thing on a clerical error by a staffer who passed away last year. But on this recording, she's talking to the actual accomplice." I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. This went deeper than just my mother's greed. This was a network. "Who is it, Sam?" He looked toward the club, where the mayor was currently giving an impassioned speech to a news reporter about integrity and betrayal. "The man on the screen behind you tonight wasn't the only one involved," Sam said. "Check the drive. And stay at my shop tonight. It's safer than a motel. My wife has the spare room ready." I looked at Lily. She looked exhausted, her world having ended and begun again in the span of 2 hours. "Go with him, Lily," I said. "I'll be right behind you. I just need to do one more thing." "Where are you going?" she asked, clutching my sleeve. I looked at the country club, then at the Mustang. I'm going to finish the job. My mother thought she was the one in control because she had the title to my life. I'm going to show her what happens when the follower takes the wheel. I watched them drive off in Sam's truck, the Mustang idling behind them like a caged beast. I climbed into the driver's seat, the familiar scent of the interior grounding me. I plugged the thumb drive into the car's updated stereo system and hit play. My mother's voice filled the car. She sounded frantic, breathless. I don't care what the girl knows. Just make sure the final transfer is cleared. If she wakes up and starts asking about the Mustang, I'll tell her it was impounded. By the time she gets out of that hospital, we'll be in the lake house and the records will be shredded. Right, Richard? My blood turned to ice. Richard. Richard wasn't the auditor. Richard was the judge who was presiding over my father's estate, the man who had assured me that everything was in order while I was grieving, the man who was currently sitting in his study, probably waiting for my mother to call him and say the gala was a success. I put the car in gear. I didn't head for Sam's shop. I headed for the courthouse district. I had the evidence, I had the car, and now I had the name of the man who thought he was going to help my mother disappear. But as I drove, I noticed a pair of headlights in my rear-view mirror, high beams, bright and aggressive. They'd been behind me since I left the country club. I accelerated. They accelerated. I swung the Mustang onto a side street, my heart racing. This wasn't the police. This wasn't Sam. The high beams in my mirror were blinding, two twin suns of predatory light that refused to fade. Every time I shifted gears, feeling the Mustang's raw power surge through the steering wheel, the vehicle behind me matched my pace. It wasn't a police cruiser. It was a heavy, dark SUV, the kind used by people who want to be invisible while taking up as much space as possible. I was still weak from the pneumonia, my lungs burning as I breathed in the cold night air, but the adrenaline was acting like a high-octane fuel. "You picked the wrong girl to chase," I whispered, my knuckles white against the leather-wrapped wheel. I knew these roads. My father had taught me to drive on these backcountry bends long before I had a license. I knew where the pavement turned to loose gravel and where the sharp curves hid steep embankments. I also knew that Judge Richard's private estate was just 5 miles ahead, nestled behind a gated driveway that he thought kept the world out. The SUV lunged forward, ramming my rear bumper. The impact jolted my spine, the sound of grinding metal echoing through the cabin. They weren't trying to pull me over. They were trying to run me off the road. I didn't panic. I remembered my father's voice. In a fight between a tank and a scout, the scout wins by being where the tank isn't. I slammed on the brakes just as we approached Dead Man's Hook, a sharp U-bend over a creek. The SUV, expecting me to accelerate to stay ahead, overshot. Tires screamed as the driver fought for control. I flicked the wheel, sliding the Mustang into a perfect drift, the tail end kicking up a cloud of dust that blinded the pursuer for a split second. By the time they regained their bearings, I was gone, cutting through a narrow tractor path that led to the back of the judge's property. I pulled the Mustang under the canopy of an old willow tree and killed the lights. My heart was thumping so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I grabbed my bag, the ledger, and the thumb drive. I moved through the shadows of the judge's garden. The house was a colonial-style fortress of integrity. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the study, I saw him. Judge Richard. He was pacing, a glass of amber liquid in one hand and a burner phone in the other. He looked nothing like the dignified man who had patted my shoulder at the funeral. He looked hunted. I didn't knock. I didn't wait. I found the side door, the one the housekeeper used, and found it unlocked. Arrogance is a funny thing. It makes men forget to bolt the door because they think their reputation is armor enough. I walked into the study just as he was shouting into the phone. "I don't care about the gala. If the girl has the ledger, we are both dead. Find her and..." "She's right here. Richard." The phone slipped from his hand, thudding onto the thick Persian rug. He spun around, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. "You," he breathed. How did you get in here? You're supposed to be in the hospital or at the bottom of the creek." I stepped into the light, holding the thumb drive up. "I heard your conversation with my mother. I heard you planning the final transfer. I heard you talk about shredding the records of my father's life." Richard tried to regain his composure, pulling his shoulders back. "That recording is inadmissible. It's a private conversation. You've committed breaking and entering, young lady. I could have you arrested in 10 minutes. "Go ahead," I said, leaning against his mahogany desk. "Call the chief. Oh wait, he's currently busy processing my mother. And I'm sure he'd love to see the secondary backup I found. You see, Richard, my mother didn't just record her calls. She kept a safety net of her own. She had a digital folder titled Richard's Cut. It details every bribe you took to look the other way while she bled the pension fund dry." I was bluffing about the folder title, but I knew the numbers in the ledger matched his signatures on the estate dockets. I saw the moment the bluff hit home. His eyes darted to the safe behind his desk. "You're a smart girl," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous purr. "But you're playing a game you don't understand. That money is gone. It's moved through 3 different offshore accounts. You can ruin me, yes, but you'll never get it back. You'll be a hero for a day. And then you'll be a pauper for the rest of your life." "I don't want the money, Richard," I said, echoing what I'd told my mother. "I want the truth, and I want the one thing you can give me right now." I pulled out a document I had prepared in the motel, a full confession and a resignation. "Sign this, and give me the access codes to the offshore accounts. Not for me, for the pension fund, for the people in this town whose lives you and my mother treated like a piggy bank. And if I don't, then the '67 Mustang parked in your garden isn't just a car," I said, a cold smile playing on my lips. "It's a mobile broadcasting station. The moment I hit send on my phone, every file on this drive goes to the state attorney and the local news. You won't just lose your job, you'll lose your freedom. And in prison, Judge, I hear they don't treat dishonorable guests very well." He looked at me, and for the first time I saw him see me, not as a grieving daughter, not as a sick girl, but as the daughter of the man he had betrayed. He saw my father's eyes in mine. With a trembling hand, he picked up a pen. As he signed, I felt a weight lift off my chest that had been there since the day the doctors told me my father's heart had stopped. I wasn't just getting justice. I was finishing the work he started. I took the papers, the codes, and the drive. I walked out of that house as the first rays of dawn started to bleed into the sky. But as I reached my car, I saw my phone light up. A text from an unknown number. "You think you won. Check the lake house. Lily isn't the only secret your mother kept." My heart stopped. I looked at the Mustang. The car that had been my sanctuary. I had the confession. I had the names. But everything was changing again. The drive to the lake house was the longest 30 minutes of my life. The sun was beginning to crest over the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold. My body was screaming for rest, every muscle aching from the fever and the fight, but my mind was a high-frequency wire. Lily isn't the only secret. The words looped in my head like a haunting melody. I pulled into the gravel driveway of the cottage, the house my father had bought for me, the house my mother had used as a hideout for her lies. It looked peaceful, nestled among the pines, the water of the lake reflecting the morning light like a sheet of hammered silver. I burst through the front door, my hand gripped tight around the folder of confessions. Lily? Sam? The house was quiet, too quiet. I ran toward the kitchen, my boots thundering on the hardwood, and stopped dead. Lily and Sam were sitting at the kitchen table. They weren't hurt. They weren't tied up. They were looking at a small rusted metal box that sat open between them. "You're okay," I gasped, leaning against the door frame, my lungs finally hitching. "We're fine," Sam said, his voice steady but solemn. "But while we were waiting for you, Lily remembered something. She said our mother used to spend hours in the floorboards of the guest closet when she thought Lily was asleep." Lily looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed. She held out a single tattered piece of paper. It wasn't just about the money or the sister, was it? She was protecting herself from him, too. I took the paper. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a life insurance policy, but the beneficiary wasn't my mother. It wasn't even me. The beneficiary was a trust fund for a man named Thomas, my father's middle name. But the policy date was from 6 months ago, 2 years after my father's funeral. The room tilted. I sat down heavily in the chair next to Lily. My father is dead. I saw the casket. I saw the grave. Did you? Sam asked softly. You were 20. You were handled by your mother's family doctor. You were told it was a heart attack in the middle of the night. You never saw him in the hospital, did you? The memory hit me like a physical blow. The closed casket, my mother's insistence that he had been too ravaged by the attack for an open viewing, the way she had hurried the service along. I looked back at the box. Inside was a burner phone, a set of keys to a house in a different state, and a letter addressed to me. My dearest daughter, if you are reading this, your mother has finally been stopped. I knew she was working with Richard. I knew she was poisoning my reputation and eventually my body. I had to disappear to stay alive long enough to make sure you were taken care of. I've been watching from the shadows, waiting for the day you'd find the Mustang and the strength to use it. I'm not in that grave, honey. I'm waiting for you at the place where the mountains meet the sea. I dropped the letter, the room spinning. My mother hadn't just stolen my car. She hadn't just stolen my money. She had stolen a person. She had let me grieve a living man for 2 years so she could control the estate without his interference. The surprise I had given her at the gala, the humiliation, the loss of her status, it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough for what she had done. I looked at Sam. You knew. I suspected, Sam said. I didn't have proof until we found this box tonight. She kept him hidden in a private care facility under a fake name, telling him you were dead so he wouldn't try to find you. She told you he was dead so you wouldn't look for him. It was the perfect cage. I stood up, the fire in my soul reaching a white-hot intensity. My mother was currently sitting in a holding cell. She thought she was facing embezzlement charges. She thought she was facing a few years in a minimum security clubhouse for white-collar criminals. She had no idea I was coming back to that police station with kidnapping and fraud charges that would ensure she never saw the sun again. 1 year later, the Mustang purred as I pulled into a driveway overlooking the Oregon coast. The air was salty and fresh, a world away from the suffocating secrets of my hometown. Lily sat in the passenger seat, a book in her lap, looking healthy and happy. We were no longer strangers. We were a family built from the wreckage. My mother is serving a life sentence. Richard took a plea deal that stripped him of everything but his name. I stepped out of the car and looked toward the porch of a small blue house. An older man stood there, his hair whiter than I remembered, his shoulders a little more stooped. But when he saw the '67 Mustang pull in, he smiled. It was the same smile that had taught me how to change a tire, the same smile that had told me to always have a backup. I had lost everything I thought I knew, only to find everything I actually needed. My mother tried to sell my life away, but in the end, she only gave me the keys to my freedom. She sold my car while I was hospitalized. But right after, I gave her the one thing she feared most, the truth. And the truth set us all free. That is the end of my story. It's been a long road, but standing here now, I wouldn't change a single mile of it. If this story reminded you that it's never too late to take your power back, please hit that like button. It helps more people find their own strength. And if you haven't yet, subscribe and join our community. I'll be sharing more of my journey and how Lily and I are rebuilding our lives together. What would you do if you found out your whole life was built on a secret? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're looking for more stories of justice and powerful comebacks, click the video on your screen right now. You won't want to miss the next one.